Hello, lovely humans. I'm Wyo Lee, and you are listening to Sex Stories, a podcast where we talk to the sexiest, most thoughtful humans to inspire our curiosities and sex lives and to make the most ripples of love across the whole wide world possible. As always, please keep your sexy thoughts about me and our guests to yourself unless you were talking to either one of us through our OnlyFans, and enjoy. Our guest today is a white with a pinch of Egyptian, ex-Mormon, sex witch / fuck witch with Christian mystic leanings, a queer cis femme who claims to be chronologically 41 but really must be magical because she looks much younger. She is polyamorous, has been engaged to herself for 4 years, and is also dabbling in a 3-month situationship. She loves receiving foot worship, really any kind of worship, and, from the right person, spankings. She is a switch when it comes to paddling, bondage, and restraints, is into pony, puppy, and kitty play, and also identifies as a starfucker, rock stars, famous, and even quasi-famous people. A closet goth, former cult member, and stripper, she now works as a love and sacred intimacy coach, a professional courtesan, i.e. legal hooker, and an OnlyFans bae. She splits her time between Salt Lake City and Las Vegas. Welcome, Natasha Rose.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing intro.
I'm very excited to hear all of your details, but can you start off by telling us, if you had to rate yourself on a sexual shamometer, with 10 being the most full of shame and 1 being not so shamey, where do you fall today right now?
Today, I would say like a 2, but I would say including work stuff, I'm usually like a 3.
Okay. Can you give us a little, history of your shamometer fluctuations over the years? Just if you had to, where you've come from and where you are now and when it's the lowest and the highest and what pokes it the most, especially if it's related to work?
Honestly, I used to be so curious that I didn't really get hung up in the shame, which is weird because I grew up in a very conservative, anti-sex culture, but I just had this curiosity and desire that was just insatiable. And so I think that my involvement in the sex industry kind of added a lot of layers of shame, to be honest.
Okay. But it sounds like also it's come down.
So here's the thing. I'm deeply empathetic. And so I think that I'm really sensitive to external shame and I internalize that a lot. And so I've done a lot of work on myself. So it's easier for me to identify where the shame is stemming from. I have to do regular grounding techniques and kind of energetic cleanses to kind of strip off these layers of shame so that I don't start identifying them as my own.
Yeah.
And so as long as I'm really good about doing that, there's not this layer of shame plaque.
Yeah, totally.
It's usually just this little shame film residue.
When are the moments that you've been the lowest, most sex loving, shame free? If you're around certain friends, or is it different if you talk personal life versus work life?
I think probably the most free I ever was when I was living in Wisconsin and I was dating and living with a professional dominatrix and we just had so much fun.
Oh, that's so cool. Wait, were you guys an item or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So she had a boyfriend at the time and it was their home that I moved into, but we would all sleep in the same king size bed together. And even though I didn't feel like I was sexually compatible with him, he and I would tag team her and it was super, super fun. So once we got our dynamic worked out, it was so amazing. And even beyond that, she at the time was ostracized from her bio family. And so she had created this huge chosen family and network in that city. And so I just got to step into that. And so there were orgies, there were play parties. Our life was highly sexual, highly public. And it was just this beautiful network and community where we took care of each other. And there was a lot of sexual freedom. There was a lot of sex positivity. And it was just this golden era, which was also the beginning of my sex work career when I started stripping. And it was just full of expression and freedom and mutual care and community. And it was just so, so gorgeous. And that was when I was the most shame-free. And I think a little element of that was that I was so far away from my family. I wasn't worried about how my shenanigans would affect the way that people perceived them. And so it was really, really liberating.
Oh my God, what an excellent tease. I am so excited to hear more details. But first, can you give us just a little overview of what's your sex life like right now? And what are your favorite parts?
Honestly, my real sex life includes a lot of self-pleasure. So I do a lot of sex magic with my self-pleasure and a lot of deity work. So I fuck gods while I'm self-pleasuring and things like that. So
That's cool.
That's a huge part of like my pandemic life involves, I mean, some people would call it fantasy, but I call it like deity work, and it's like part of my spiritual practice.
Awesome. For someone who maybe has no experience with sex magic, can you give just a couple sentences so that those of us who require really tangible things can like latch on to what exactly it is for you?
Sure. I think it's different for different sex witches, but for me, part of the ritual is setting a specific intention. A lot of times it's money abundance. Sometimes it's calling in a specific type of partner that I would really love to be in partnership with. And so you create a container. I kind of riff off of Layla Martin's work around sex magic, where I try not to think about specific people. I just work with like a fantasy archetype or just an essence of what I'm looking to find in real life, not getting so specifically attached to a specific person, because she kind of talks about that in the framework of being like black magic, so to speak. And so I try to avoid that. But sometimes I fuck myself on a pile of money. When I was stripping, I had a regular who spoiled me for my birthday and brought $1,000 in a Sephora gift bag. And so 500 of that I put in the bank, but I keep $500 in single dollar bills that I spread all over the bed. Sometimes I put hundreds and 20s in there as well, but it's just like
Wow.
for volume, and it's really, really fun.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
Yeah. And sometimes it's more energetic. Sometimes I do like a five senses reality where I imagine my ideal outcome of the intention that I set, and I flesh out like what it tastes like, what it smells like, what it feels like, what it looks like, what it sounds like.
Mm.
And I kind of hold that perfect moment of success in my mind, and then I cycle energy through each of my chakras and then blast it out through my crown chakra into the universe. And then I feel acceptance and permission to have this experience rain down through my body from the universe. It's a really beautiful process.
Beautiful. Okay, can you now please tell us what is sexy to Natasha Rose?
I mean, kind of like my sense of humor, I have a pretty broad sense of what's sexy to me. I'm a pretty like lusty, horny person. But to give you specifics, what really, really turns me on: confidence, presence, generosity, curiosity, integrity, kindness, consistency, and nurturance.
Okay, those are great words. Okay, people say confidence a lot. What is confidence to you? Like, what's sexy confidence? And is it feeling confident or is it also seeing confident? Is it both?
Yes. Well, and this is like a magical or energetic idea, but like attracts like. I think that if I'm confident, I'm more likely to attract someone who is confident themselves.
Yeah.
And when I'm not confident, especially at work, I think there's this tendency to attract people who are like predators and
Right.
kind of want to feed off of that vulnerability that's not respected or cherished. But to answer your question about confidence, the thing that turns me on the most is like swaggery confidence. So it's that like charisma and pizzazz and that like sparkle that I think is like the most prominent marker of confidence. But there are also quieter markers of confidence, like body posture, the way that people navigate and move through a room physically. I think that that's where like the kindness and nurturance and things like that come into it, where I feel like there's a certain level of confidence required for somebody to smile at someone, where they're facing their energy outwards towards me, and it's more of an interaction than like, look at me, I'm the peacock, you must worship me and follow me around and give me all your attention. And it's not a reciprocal co-creation. And so I think that when somebody has that like really deep, I mean, it's also self-love, but that confidence that's like real and not for show, that they have that deeper ability to be present and to be kind and to be emotionally generous.
So, on that note, then tell us, when do you feel sexiest?
I have been exploring my deeper femininity. And so for me, when I have a nice hot bath and I'm listening to like my Cannon's radio playlist or my Delirium radio playlist and just like luxuriously getting ready, I have my like favorite perfume on, I have lots and lots of time and spaciousness to prepare myself, and I feel dolled up and I feel like I look good. I definitely feel good. And I have that like yummy, soft, feminine essence about me. That's when I feel the sexiest.
Amazing. Okay, can you give us an example now of a moment where there was a sexy, explicitly clear yes that you either gave or received that led to something super duper hot?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is going back to my Wisconsin days, but my first real girlfriend, who was also a dominatrix, called me up and said that the pony girl for this club performance had canceled last minute and asked if I would be willing to learn how to pull a pony cart and then do it on stage for a public performance.
Wait, can you break it down for us a little bit? Wait, so you were dressed like a pony, like pony play pony girl?
Yeah, so I had like this little like bit that had like the pony bit, and then it had like a harness and it had the little pony ears, and then I had like a different harness around my waist that had like this gorgeous luxurious pony tail piece that was like switchy when I walked. And the dominant for the scene actually had like a wheelchair, and so there were like these extender poles that like came from the arms of the wheelchair. And so he was like so amazing in training me how to like interpret these different signals, so I knew like which way to go, and he would kind of like direct me with these like signals which way to turn. And so we put on this like little pulling cart pony show for this crowd.
So that was like a same day experience. And did you have hooves?
No, I just had like stripper heels on.
Whoa. Did you get to do it again after that, or was it just that one experience?
I played with him other times, but not as like pony play.
Yeah.
And as an exhibitionist, like there was this whole other element of like being witnessed by like this enthusiastic crowd in a club setting. And so that was kind of a dream come true for me.
Wow.
And it was like both intimate and super public, right? But I feel like I had like such a deeper connection with the Dom because of like the way that we were both witnessed in our like prowess in that moment.
Gorgeous. Okay. When you tell a friend that you got laid last night, what do you usually mean? What counts as sex for you? And does it change in different contexts for you?
Sex for me is like a physical manifestation of a soul connection or like a spiritual connection. Everything else to me is just fucking, which is also great.
Love. That's a great answer. Okay, now can you tell us, did you ever get a helpful sex education or an explicit health and safety talk or a lesson in consent growing up from an adult that you trusted?
Definitely not anything around consent. Like I feel like when I was growing up, especially in conservative Mormon Utah, it's almost like an anti-consent culture. It's overall kind of like a grooming culture. And so we don't really encourage people to feel empowered to consent or not consent. But as far as like sex ed goes, I was like a very curious and lusty child. And so I got the sex talk when I was 5 years old, and my mom like broke it down for me. I can't remember if she drew pictures or just like laid out the like physiology of sex. And so I had like a very thorough understanding of like the physical aspects of sex. But I think even during my first sexual encounters, like I didn't really feel empowered to have full consent or enthusiastic consent. There was like a lot of guilt and shame and doing things out of obligation for probably even like the first like 2 or 3 years of my active sexual life.
Wow. Okay. Do you feel comfy giving us a couple of like concrete examples of the teachings you got that were kind of like groomy or not empowering?
Yeah, like honestly, I've been out of the church for so long that all I can notice is what I see in like popular culture in Salt Lake City. But when I was in the culture, there was definitely this like very oppressive message that like women were supposed to be beautiful and fuckable and pretty girls didn't get married. And there's this whole like, I think that women go on like a mission like 2 years later than the men do. But like there was always this like undercurrent of messaging like from my father that like if I didn't get married early enough, then I'd have to go on a mission. Like it was like a punishment or something, or like only lesbians go on missions. And it was like only ugly girls go on missions. And it was always this like low threat of like, if I'm not good enough to be picked by some man, that this is going to be the negative outcome.
Oh, man.
So to me as an adult, I'm like, that is disgusting. And like, I don't think that he knew any better because he grew up in like an even more oppressive, even more conservative Mormon culture. And so I don't think that he ever like had the objectivity to think for himself, like, are these my values? Is this what I want to believe? I think that he just thought that it was the way things were. And he was trying to teach me how to be successful within that system.
Right. I mean, trauma gets passed down
Yeah.
generationally.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is jumping ahead a little bit, but did you know that you were queer at that point? Like getting those messages about
No,
lesbians? Okay. Okay.
no. And maybe it was just nurture versus nature at that time. Like I thought I was pretty heterosexual until I was about 14, I think.
Okay. Going back to sex ed a little bit, what, if anything, happens to your shamometer when it's time to have a health and safety conversation? And how do you usually initiate the conversations with your partner or partners about safer sex?
Oh, I want to die every single time.
Is that true both for like work and play, like professionally? Is that still true, or is it different for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Honestly, like it makes my guts churn and
Mm,
I feel like they're on fire. And I do it anyway because, especially in real life, knowing my partner's history makes me feel safe. In a work context, I feel like with the testing that I go through and also the protocols that are in place at the brothel that I work for, I don't feel like it's as necessary to have such an in-depth like conversation around it. If they bring it up, I will definitely get into that with them and the specifics, but I feel like it's less necessary that statistically like any risks that are still remaining in that environment are risks that I would have in my real life anyway. And so I feel like the people that I interact with at work are so intimidated and frightened anyway that
right.
I don't want to add any more fear and like
Okay.
intimidation to that. Like I don't want to plant the seed that like, oh, statistically there's a 2 or 3% chance that blah 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 blah
Yeah. Yeah.
could happen. Like maybe we should like wait until you come in with a full body rubber suit that covers every square inch of skin before we proceed.
I have this idea of like, there's got to be a way in our near future where you can show up at the door, do a urine sample, prick your finger. And I have dreams of having this both at a play space, both at like a sex ed museum that's like a great second date destination. Anyway, and it would be cool if that was at brothels too. So I've interviewed one courtesan so far, but can you just tell us the practices that are in place and like kind of remind it, like what is normal? You said you get tested, and then what are the practices that are kind of like expected there?
Okay, so before I even get to interact with public facing clients and things like that, I do a vaginal swab and a blood test that tests for chlamydia, syphilis, HIV, and gonorrhea. So once I do interact with a client, once we negotiate our party, then I do what's called a dick check or a DC, where I visually inspect and physically inspect their penis, their foreskin, if they have one, and their balls and the skin around the area for any lesions, cuts, bumps, any kind of unusual discolored discharge, things like that. And so that's to make sure that there are like no visual signs of something unhealthy that would put me at risk.
Okay. Do you only work with dudes?
I mean, statistically, I'm more likely to interact with men, but I've also worked with some couples. I would love to just like worship and play with and interact with, or be worshipped by a gorgeous woman.
Okay. Do you inspect those too, or is it like
Yes.
ladies are? Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Yeah. It's not quite as intrusive. Like, I'm not going to like penetrate a woman during a pussy check, but I do kind of like check all the folds, kind of like I would like under the balls of a man to make sure that there aren't like any hidden things that are going to be unexpected later on in the session. A lot of times I have them sit down too because I mean it's kind of invasive. So and I'm always just like, hee, I could show you mine if you want to. Which I don't know why I still get like so schoolgirl crushy when I play with women.
Cool. So in your regular life, are you like that sounds like you actually, even if it makes you uncomfortable, it sounds like you have a sex ed superpower or like a health and safety superpower. Do you usually find yourself initiating in your personal life, or do you tend to attract partners that can start those combos?
I mean, it's a huge turn on when the other partner has protection and they're proactive about talking about it.
Yeah.
That's so hot for me because I feel like it creates this like safe container that I can just relax within. Unfortunately, that's very uncommon. I'm usually the first person to bring it up. A lot of times that gives me the impression that like I'm the only one who cares about it, but
Yeah.
like this does kind of give away my age, but I was alive kind of in like the tail end of the HIV AIDS pandemic. And so even when I was a teenager and sexually active, I was very afraid of being exposed to HIV. And there wasn't really like a good treatment or cure at the time. And so I knew people who literally died. And
Oh,
so I feel like I still carry that really heavy weight of the fear of HIV.
yeah.
I've always taken it very seriously, and I've never gotten to the point where I was like, I'm not really worried about it. Like, I'm even at this point where like pre-cum or like genital exposure is like really intimidating to me unless I know like a lot about someone's sexual history. And so I think that that's gotten a little bit worse since I've been like working in full service in the sex industry, where I'm just like,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
unless you still have your underwear on or unless you already have a condom on, like, it's harder for me to maintain the fantasy if their level of awareness doesn't match my own.
I feel that. I feel that so hard. I'm like, oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, a bear cock is hot, but like we haven't talked, and I know that you're not putting it in. That's not my concern.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Can you take us through your sexual timeline now, starting at the very beginning, and just what are the milestones that feel important for us to learn about Natasha Rose's sex stories? We've already heard that you were a lusty young child. What was it that inspired your mother to give you the talk when you were 5 years old?
Honestly, I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure that I must have asked. She's probably asexual, and I don't think that she self identifies that way, but that's how I would probably identify her. I think that she is a fabulous mother, and so I'm really grateful that she did have enough of a sex life to have me and my awesome siblings, but I don't think that she's like a very like sexually expressive person. So I don't think that she would just offer that information without me kind of pushing her for it at some level.
What's the first thing you remember sex wise? Like, when did you become aware of it or any curiosities that, even if you were too young to have identified it as sexy, like, what do you remember earliest?
So having grown up in such a stifled sexual culture, I didn't know anything about sex until I was already having sex. So it's kind of embarrassing. And I think it's also hilarious because as a child, like I was very like romantic, I would say. And like looking back, I would identify it as like horny. But like I always had boyfriends, I always had crushes. When I started going to like dances in like junior high and things like that, like I loved physical contact and I loved being touched by boys and I loved feeling their heart on in their pants when it was like pressed up against me. And so I didn't know what to do with that. Like when I would fantasize in my mind, like I would fantasize about kissing and making out and like having that physical contact, and it was kind of like full body dry humping or like a sensual cuddling or something like that. But then it would be like a made for TV movie where like when we went to make love, it would like fade away because I didn't know
Yeah.
what that looked like because I didn't have any exposure to really anything until I was probably about 10 or 12 or something like that. My neighbor's dad had like a subscription to like Fredericks of Hollywood catalogs. And so we would steal those. And that
Amazing.
kind of like opened my mind to like sexuality at one level, but I
Yeah.
still didn't know. Like our Barbie dolls would like wear hair ties as outfits because of that. But like
That's also where I got my first corset and thigh highs and like lacy thong. What about your own body? When did you like, was that after having sex or was that pre dances? Did you know what a hard on was when you were getting danced on?
yeah, but only like in a physiological sense. Like,
Okay.
oh, that's a penis, and when it gets engorged with blood, then it gets erect.
Okay, but your own body, when did you start to like feel her?
Okay, there was so much shame around masturbation, and there still is. Like, I try not to give the Mormon religion like any of my energy or power, but I'm pretty sure that they're still so anti-masturbation that there's this like prevalent belief that like it's almost better to like kill yourself than it is to masturbate in the church. Like it's
Oh.
so fucking toxic. Like that's part of the reason that I'm just like I love my family members that are still involved with the church, but I don't support their involvement in it, and it's like a huge gap between us because I just can't really support anyone believing in something that like makes gay children and like pro sex or sex curious children hate themselves that much. It like really fucking hurts me.
I'm like, I'm fine with all religions, the love parts. Any part of a religion that's a hate part, including self hate, I don't think a God has hate, personally.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't want to worship one that does. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
But yeah, like it didn't really even occur to me to self-pleasure. Or if it did, like it was always kind of framed in like pleasing my partner. Like when I was trying to think of my sexual history, I was like, maybe I masturbated for boyfriends in my late teens or something like that. But it was always like performative for someone else's pleasure. It wasn't like an act of like getting to know my own body and exploring my own pleasure. It was like to please or entice or turn on somebody else.
Okay.
So I was like probably 22 before I ever masturbated. And it was like around the same time that I got my first sex toys. So that's kind of like late blooming, but there was like so much of my sexual history where it was to please and impress and entice other people.
Okay, so jumping back and filling in some gaps, I would love to hear what formative partner experiences feel important to you. And I would love to hear you said you were 14-ish maybe when you realized that you were attracted not to just penis owners.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more, wherever you want to start from.
So I had this cute, sweet group of little weirdos as friends when I was 14. They were goth kids and skaters. And there was this one girl who was like, oh, she had like a really witty way of saying it. I can't think of her exact phrasing right now, but she was just like basically asking if I was into girls. And even though she wasn't my type, like she was a little bit more butch, I was like a little bit scared, but like her desire like really turned me on. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And I was like, yeah, I do like girls. I feel like she felt my hesitation as well as my titillation. And so she never pursued it. But it just like awakened this awareness within me that I was like, oh, I don't think I even considered that as an option before. And so once I even just like started exploring that in like a fantasy context, it was really hot. And I was just like, oh, I guess I'm bisexual. And this was like before pansexual was really an identity.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I was afraid of that desire. Like the first girl that I ever took out on a date, we almost got beat up outside of a diner because these guys saw us kissing and like this guy got all up in our face and we're like, are you dykes? Blah, blah, blah. And it was like actually really fucking scary.
Wow.
So it was like almost immediate karmic retribution. It really planted this idea that like being out wasn't safe in public. And so it took even a couple more years after that before I felt safe enough to have an actual girlfriend. And so I think also being outside of Utah and being in a different environment where I wasn't worried about how it affected my family really helped me feel safe to explore that. And then also like my first girlfriend was just so confident and badass and sexy that it was just easy to get like sucked into her energy and to like feel the spaciousness of her own freedom.
Wow. Are there any partners that feel important to talk about before we dive into that relationship?
I mean, there was one boyfriend, he was like a computer nerd who gave me my first like partnered orgasm or like my first real orgasm. So that feels important just to touch on.
Yeah.
And that was until I was like 17. So I was having sex for like a full 3 years before I ever came.
With different partners, or was he your partner for those 3 years?
No, he was probably like my third or fourth partner. So my first couple of partners were young, like I was, and so didn't really know what they were doing.
Did you have a sense at the time that like it's not happening or it should be more pleasureful, or were you just like, I guess that's what it is? Like, what do you remember?
It goes back to that whole performative aspect. Like I knew that I was supposed to be orgasming and I knew that I was supposed to be experiencing pleasure, but a lot of it was faked. I was kind of emulating what I saw in TV and in movies for the benefit of my partner's ego, basically.
Wow. Okay, so we had an orgasm with nerdy computer boy. Anything else to say about that relationship before we get to your first girlfriend?
Just that he kind of broke my heart. Like he said that I was like out of his league and that eventually I was going to leave him. So he broke up with me.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it really hurt my feelings. Yeah. And I think that it was around that time that I decided that it wasn't safe to combine sexual pleasure with emotional intimacy. So there was like a wild stretch, probably between that time until I met my dominatrix girlfriend, that like I was pretty dissociated and disconnected from my pleasure. Like I didn't want to come because I didn't want to care about someone enough to like allow them to hurt me. So I was just going through like a sexual checklist. Like I wanted to fuck all these DJs and I wanted to fuck musicians.
So this gets into your like star fucky kink. Like, do you identify it as a kink, like, or a star fucker? But
It,
like,
it was the roots of it for
okay,
sure.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't so much about using sex to climb the social ladder. It was just like, I assumed that these people who were powerful and had a lot of social clout would be sexually talented, which I mean, for the most part, wasn't necessarily true.
Yeah.
But like, there was like this really hot bartender who like had a sexy car and like bought me my first beer in a bar that I snuck into with him when I was like 18. He was the first person I ever had anal with.
Wow.
Okay, there was a full wild summer. When I was 17, it was like the year before my senior year of high school. I was changing schools. I was going to go to a performing arts high school. And so I kind of was just doing whatever I wanted to try to get it out of my system before I like moved to a small town. And so that was like the first time I ever had a vibrator used on me. It was the first time I ever had sex while blindfolded. I think it was my first time that I ever got tied up by the same guy who popped my anal cherry.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like a really fun, free, like I used to think that that was my sexual prime and that I had peaked at 17
Okay.
because I had so many wild experiences. I don't know why I didn't really consider it to be when I was like 22 to 23, which is when I was living in Wisconsin and like going through all that.
Was your dominatrix girlfriend the same, like, as your first girlfriend, or were they different people? Okay.
Yeah, same person.
So you had this wild time. You went to a performing arts school. I feel like people were probably fucking there a lot.
There were only like a handful of senior boys. So I hooked up with a junior and he like told everybody.
Oh.
And so I feel like not that I was tainted at the school necessarily. I think if anything, it like made me more fuckable. Like I was like, oh, she's not a nice queen. She puts out. It really made me hesitate to fuck any more juniors. So I messed around with some people, did some like touching and making out and heavy petting and stuff like that. But I never fucked anybody else from that school. And I was really lonely that year too. Like I took a break from drinking because to be on the drama team, you had to be like alcohol free, allegedly. Like a lot of the kids weren't, but like I took it very seriously. I was like, I am a winner and I will do what it takes and I'm on the team. And so I like was like sober. So I would go on dates with my mom because I was just like so lonely that year.
Yeah.
And I was like so hungry for adult connection. And it was a college town, but it's like a party college. So I didn't even like want to fuck the college boys because I was just like, I'm in the middle of nowhere. There's no culture here. So when I'd go back to Salt Lake City, I would like have a lot of fun.
Were you still Mormon then? Or when did you become an ex-Mormon officially? If there's an officialness to it.
Okay, so this is super embarrassing to admit, but I am still on like the official roster for the Mormon Church. There's like a whole process where I could get removed from the records. From what I've heard, it oftentimes triggers like missionaries coming to your house, and like I think
that sounds like work and giving them your energy.
Yeah, exactly. Or like doing like an exit interview with a bishop. So at some point I'm going to do it because I'm like, it's fucked up that like they're counting me as one of them when they're like actively trying to silence me and strip me of my human rights. So I think when I am ready, all it will take is for me to sit down with somebody and be like, I'm a queer sex worker and you are against everything that I believe in. And we totally disagree about like our concept of God and like what he does and does not approve of. So I don't see any way for us to like be compatible. Please take me off the list or I will like cause a ruckus. And you don't want that because it will involve stripper heels and me marching around with a big fucking picket sign.
Okay, so when in your heart were you like not Mormon?
When I was 13 years old.
Okay.
Like the concept that God would like put us on this planet and like a tiny fraction, I think it's like 13% of the population or something like that was Mormon at the time. I don't know for sure, but like the fact that like everyone else was going to hell just because they didn't get introduced to this like really tiny specific idea of what God approved of didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, I don't want a God that's like sending over 70% of the population to hell. Like it didn't make sense to me. And I just decided that didn't work for me anymore.
Okay. So how'd you get to Wisconsin? How'd you meet the girlfriend? Like, it's a big deal to leave a town, a community. Like, you went halfway across the country. Like, what happened next and how did it affect your sex life?
Okay, so the abbreviated version is I went to a college that has like a brilliant Shakespearean festival, and I only made it through like one semester of college and I had a full ride scholarship. I really, really fucked it up. I didn't really attend classes because at that point I didn't have any like carrot dangling to keep me from drinking. And I was like a really active alcoholic. And I didn't have any parental observation. Like my mom had moved to Wisconsin and joined a cult. My dad was in Salt Lake City. And so I did whatever the fuck I wanted. And I was wild. I had no discipline. And I don't think I even got grades in more than one class. I think there was like only like one costuming class that I attended enough to even receive a grade in.
Oh, wow.
So I just got like incompletes other than that. So I mean, I learned a lot socially. Like I had some really amazing gay friends that like I would party with, and I learned a lot more about the gay culture, and I kind of got included into that. But other than that, like I felt ostracized, like I was too weird for most of the boys to want to sleep with. And it was like a really dark time for me. So I dropped out of school after one semester, moved back home to Salt Lake City, and then I got into meth and alcohol, and I was like basically like a homeless gutter punk junkie. I didn't have a home. I would rob people. I would couch surf from friend group to friend group. But like my boyfriend at the time and like his little brother, like we would like rob the people that we were staying with and then we couldn't go back. At the time it was liberating though, because I'd never had freedom. Like at one point we were living with my boyfriend's business partner and I was like eating cold pizza at like 3 a.m. watching The Simpsons. And I was like, I'm an adult. I can do whatever I want. This is amazing. Yeah. So it was like going from this like naive Mormon girl to like the far extreme. It felt so good. And I feel like I really had to get that out of my system. But after doing meth for almost 2 years, like I was literally losing my fucking mind. Like I would hear voices. I was extremely paranoid. I thought that all of my friends were trying to kill me.
Oh, wow.
It was a really scary time because it was hard for me to function without being high. But I was like so paranoid and full of fear when I was high. Like I really thought that I was probably going to either die or get locked up for being crazy. So that's why I moved to Wisconsin, was because my mom lived out there. She was like, there are all these international students who come in and work these summer jobs. It's really easy to like get hired for a job for the season. Just come out here and start over. And so that's what I did. So I didn't know any drug dealers. I didn't know any junkies. And I had this fresh start, which for me actually worked.
You just quit cold turkey?
Yeah. And I decided to quit smoking at the same time too.
Holy shit. Wow, that's really powerful.
And it took like removing all the resources and temptation.
Yeah.
But luckily at that time, like meth wasn't really a big deal in Wisconsin at the time. It was more like cocaine and crack. So I got sober through the 12-step program. Like I did have a lot of community support.
Great.
So it's not like I just like magically did it on my own. I really do think that there was like a miraculous surrender to a higher power and like some kind of cosmic intervention that like gave me the strength and the willpower to just like get on that bus and put myself in this like situation where like I really didn't have any other choice other than to start over again.
Wow. Okay, so how did we then get to dominatrix, girlfriend, foot worship, like we'd heard a little bit about bondage, but like and all this beautiful play, like what were the next steps?
So this is kind of a side note, but I joined my mom's cult. I like kind of considered it to be like cheap rehab because like a lot of the room and board was like community service. So I was like surrounded by these like drug-free, alcohol-free vegetarians who would like do these like morning dance parties. And so I was just like, fuck yeah.
Like ecstatic dance or like what?
It's hard to describe. Like they called it like going to light. So my current interpretation would be like inducing kundalini energy in your body. The way that they would express it reminds me of people in those like Christian churches where they like flop around on the floor and they like wave their hands in the air and they're like, speaking in tongues and stuff like that. There was a lot of stuff like that also happening during the dance party.
This is like kind of a tangent. So I've been wiggling every day since my 30th birthday, just like literally just like full body wiggling. Eventually I'll make a wiggle movie. It's about full love and acceptance of the physical body. And because of that, people send me all kinds of like wiggle related articles. So like Alan Watts has a thing on wiggling. Wiggling's a reference in songs. At various points throughout history, there were like these hysterical like dance movements where people would just be like wiggling like in community. So it sounds like it's like also that, like, something with our nervous systems likes to, like, ecstatically, wiggly, crazily move and dance. Okay, so did you do that?
Yes.
Okay, so you had room and board, you had all these things. Were you allowed to have sex at the cult, or was it like a
Yes, yes. It was pretty, I don't know a better term than incestual. Like, everyone had fucked everyone else. It was like a pretty
Okay.
tight-knit community, so if you were, like, an adult, there were only so many partners to choose from, so, like, my AA sponsor had already fucked my boyfriend, and then, like, when he got me pregnant, he proposed to me, so, like
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify, it wasn't literal incest, like family members?
No, no,
Okay,
no, no,
okay.
no, no. Of course, there are always problems in cults and when there's like a hierarchy of
Yep,
power, but I wouldn't necessarily say that there was like sex abuse happening. There
okay.
were other forms of like financial abuse and things like that that came to light later on. But I don't feel like I was personally damaged by the cult. I think at one point, like the time schedule, like we would meet at like 8 a.m. and then like do like a listening to our leader session. And then like we'd do our like dance party thing and then have lunch afterwards. So at one point I was like, I'm 22 years old. Like, I don't want to be getting out of bed and being somewhere at 8 fucking a.m. and then like working full time so that I can like be in the middle of nowhere. So
Yeah.
that's when I started dabbling. I would go to like the capital city and go to these like clubs and things like that. And then I found out that there was like a BDSM party and it was like for ticket holders only. So you had to get a ticket ahead of time. And I wasn't able to do that for some reason. So I just like I had my mom help me.
Amazing.
I made this outfit out of electrical tape, so I had her like help me put like make sure it was symmetrical in the back, but it was like crisscrosses of electrical tape, and then I had like X's over my nipples, and I just had these like tiny little booty shorts and like thigh highs, and then these like pretty woman level of like strange kind of like not fitted thigh high boots that I bought at the local sex shop. It was like totally 80s hooker boots.
Yeah.
And so I wore the like hooker boots and like some thigh highs and like a garter belt and then like this like top made only of like electrical tape that my mom helped me adhere before I went
Incredible.
to the sex party.
Wow. Was that your first sex party? Did you already know about kink? It sounds like, well, yeah, I guess you got tied up before.
When I lived with my fiance, he had internet, and that was like the first time I ever had private internet. Like
Okay.
before that, I'd only ever had access to internet at like a library or something like that.
Okay.
So I'm not going to be like
Yeah.
BDSM kick stories, but like since I finally had privacy to explore that, he actually ended up getting kicked out of the country because he was Australian. And so when he was gone, I was like holding down the fort and paying rent in his apartment and things like that.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had all the time in the world to like read these naughty erotic stories about like forced bondage and servitude and like these like maids in corsets and tight bondage and walking around in these tiny restrictive high heels and like all this stuff. And it was really, really hot. And I started exploring self bondage at that time. So I was doing a lot of that until he got back. And then we explored like some public role play and stuff like that. Like I would dress like a little schoolgirl and he would be my teacher and we'd be like meeting outside of school at a restaurant, things like that. So
Fun.
we're kind of dabbling in like light BDSM and things like that. And so I think it was while he was out of the country is when I went to the public/private invite only, ticket holder only BDSM party.
Yeah.
And that's where I met my first girlfriend. She was like one of the dominatrixes who was hostessing this party. And so I like showed up. I didn't have a ticket. There was this like creepy guy in the parking lot with like a paddle strapped to his belt. And I was just like, oh, I just showed up. I don't have a ticket. Do you know how this works? And he was like, I have an extra ticket. And I like insisted on paying for the ticket because I didn't want to like hang out with this guy for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, you have an extra ticket and your partner couldn't come? I need a ticket. How convenient. And so I actually got into this party and ended up playing with my dominatrix girlfriend. She had me like in this like cage and I think I had wrist restraints on and she was like doing some light cropping and things like that. And it was just like super, super fun. And we exchanged phone numbers and she invited me to her birthday party like a month later.
Wow.
Which was like a big sex hot tub party. A few of the attendees were on mushrooms.
Oh, wow.
I gave like 2 different guys hand jobs in the hot tub. And like later I would become friends with all of these people, but like I never met any of them before. And so like I didn't even know that she had a boyfriend I thought that he was like her gay submissive. And
Okay.
so I was like basically like fisting her for the first time when she was like, oh no, this is my partner. And I was like, oh,
You were fisting her?
yeah,
Whoa, you know how to fist?
yes. Well, she taught me how to. Like, she had 3 children, so it was like super easy.
Okay.
And that was like what got her off. And so, like, she kind of taught me how to pleasure her the most deeply. And so that was kind of like our little like routine, you know? And like her boyfriend ended up like sticking his finger in my butt, like while I was fisting her. I'm like, I guess it's the least I can do to let your boyfriend finger my butthole while I'm
Wow.
fisting his girlfriend in a room full of people.
Okay. It sounds like there was not necessarily like explicit consent, but in the like looking back, it was like part of your whole
Yes.
like now polycule. Was this your first exposure to poly? Or I guess the cult sounds kind of
No, I didn't dabble in poly while I was in the cult. Like I was pretty I mean, I think it hurt my fiance's feelings. Like he kind of like did this weird ritual where he like gave me away to my girlfriend and her boyfriend. He's
okay.
like, "Oh, she's yours now," like passing the
Oh,
torch, and I was just like, I'm not really yours to give anymore,
right,
but great."
right.
Yeah. But I had kind of outgrown the small town that the cult was in, and I just like really needed to explore my sexuality. And I was like a young adult at that point. Like I hadn't really experienced anything outside of like homeless drug adventures. I mean, I did like go cross country and do the whole like punk rock Jack Kerouac thing. Like it was an adventure, and it gave me like access to a level of strength that I didn't know that I contained before when I was just like a gothic club kid. And
Yeah.
so I know without a shadow of a doubt at this point that I'm a survivor because I got through that. I reclaimed my sanity.
Yeah.
I still have most of my teeth.
Yeah.
And I paid to replace the ones that I lost. And I know where my edges are now. You know, like I explored to the very edge. I went over the edge and now I know where the edge is,
You
you know?
really like stretched out life and you're like, all right, here I am.
Yeah. But then like the way that I wanted to do it at that point was to explore my sexuality. And that's when I became a stripper, was when I was living in Wisconsin, and everything was just super fun. Like I had more money than I've ever had. I had more freedom than I had ever had. And so that was kind of when I became like an actual adult and I became like an empowered human, I think. Like that was when I intentionally started doing the things that I wanted to do and creating the life that I wanted.
So what did you learn about yourself when you started stripping? Like how did it affect your sexuality? And then like how did we get from there to like goddess intimacy coach?
I always wanted to be a stripper, I think. Like my high school best friend and I would like drive by the strip club and be like, "Oh, I got to pick up my paycheck." Yeah, so like we always like fantasized about it, but I think like all of my adult partners until that point had been so insecure that they didn't want me to be a stripper. And
Mhm.
so both my girlfriend and then this guy that I started dating at that time, which it really was like my first exploration of actual poly, he had done some like renovations for the local strip club. So he like knew the owner's son and he was like, we should go check it out sometime. And
Yeah.
so like we went to the strip club and like he introduced me to the owner's son and his girlfriend who was a dancer there, and it was like really fucking cool. Like I'd never been into a strip club before. And so they told me when the amateur night was, so I showed up for amateur night, and so my boyfriend and my girlfriend's boyfriend all came to support me, and it was just like so much fun. I actually forgot to take my top off during my like audition song. And so the DJ was like, "Hey, I'm going to give you another song. Take your top off." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was just like covered in money because it was like the kind of club where you can like directly receive tips in your outfit from the
Wow.
patrons. And so
Okay.
I just had like money in my thigh highs and my bra and my
Wow.
bottoms and just like everywhere. And I was just like, this is the life I was meant to live. And I was just like so high on the experience. It was like totally euphoric. And like the money was great. I think I made like $80 in like 2 or 3 songs. And I was just like,
Wow.
oh, I was meant to do this.
Oh. Was that where you discovered your exhibitionism streak, or were you already aware of it at that point?
Oh, I was definitely aware of it. It was just like a bigger, more titillating outlet for it.
What does exhibitionism feel like to you? Because people reflect to me. I posted like nudes on OnlyFans, but I was like, no, I'm being like, I post fine art nudes and I'm a naked lady with a shaved head. So isn't it funny? And I'm with tractors. Don't you get the joke? And nobody does. And so I don't identify as an exhibitionist, but I'm trying to like embrace the fun of it. So, like, what does it feel like to you?
Did you ever watch the show Lost Girl? It was about like a succubus who was also like a private investigator.
No, but that sounds amazing.
Well, there's this like very visual effect where she's like breathing in people's like sexual essence or something, so to speak. That's what it feels like to me. Like I feel like when I receive someone's attention in that way, especially if it's like hot, intense sexual attention, I like literally like breathe it in and feed off of it like a succubus, and it sustains me in this like very electric way. That's what it feels like.
But don't succubi have like kind of an evil connotation? Are you saying you feel evil, or does this go with your goth thing and I'm being a little bit literal brained here?
It's both.
Okay.
Like on like a love and light spiritual level, it's like the sustenance that I require to thrive, right?
Ooh.
So if I go too long without receiving that kind of desire and that kind of attention, then I feel like I kind of like wilt at a certain level.
Oh my God, that's how you mean like sex-wise, right? Like just, or being looked at specifically as an exhibitionist.
Both, honestly.
I connect with that. I get that.
Yeah, like at one level, I need to be fucked regularly, even if it's just by myself. And on another level, like if I don't have that feedback loop, it's kind of like any entertainer. Like we crave that attention and that like applause and that external validation where it's like, I see you and I celebrate you and you are successful. You know, it's kind of like that, but like there's also like a sexual element included in that attention. But then like I think I'm at like the juiciest, most integrated place that I've ever been in my whole life with integrating my light and my darkness. So I'm not trying to separate myself from my darkness. So there is like a predatory chase huntress kind of energy with the succubus, like feeding of receiving like the voyeuristic attention, where I do thrive as an exhibitionist, where I am taking that energy from people.
Yeah. But also like I'm a submissive and I've also received messages from dudes who are submissives, not yet ladies, and they're like, use me, take me. And I understand like wanting to be taken and wanting to have someone hunt and capture me or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So going back to like the love and light and consent, like everybody is sovereign level, like, yeah, I provide a service for the people who want to be chased and who want to be preyed upon and devoured.
Yeah.
So it is consensual still, but I do want to embrace the darkness of it where there is a hunger inside me and there is something that wants to bite into someone and to devour them.
Have you done vampire play?
Yes, I have. Yes. I had a really, really, really fun regular when I was stripping. We did like a lot of role play specifically. Like we did vampire role play. He had me dress up as a nun and punish him because he was like a Catholic schoolboy and he had like a total nun fetish.
Did you use a ruler?
Yeah. And I did like spank him with my bare hands as well.
You've done so much fun role play. Was like puppy, kitty, and pony. Like I know that we heard the pony story. Was there more to that? Were those parts of your like professional, or has that also been in your personal? Like
I haven't had any paid pony play yet.
Okay.
And I haven't actually received puppy and kitty play the way that I would love to.
Tell us how you would love to receive it. Let's call it in.
I'm just like a horny little kitty. Like this is very taboo.
We're embracing the darkness here.
We are embracing. We're going into the darkness fully now.
I'm also trying to understand taboo still, so you're helping me learn.
Yeah. Especially with like little play, but also kind of like in the like animal play world, that there's like a line that a lot of people don't want to cross where it goes from like playful to sexual. But I'm like the kind of like kitty or puppy that wants to get fucked by their owner.
Yeah, I would be too, just to be clear. I have ears and a tail that I have not yet used with a partner, and I definitely want to get fucked, for sure.
Yeah, like I think that if I'm a little kitty that's in heat, then the kindest, most like generous thing that you could possibly do is to fuck me.
Yeah, breed the fuck out of me, please.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm so glad that you get it. So,
and that's why we just need to talk with our partners ahead of time to make sure we're on the same page. I just read Tristan Taormino's Ultimate Guide to Kink, and it basically just outlines like, here's what it is for some people, here's what it is for other people. And I personally think that like judgment just because we have a differing desire is ridiculous. Like, you don't need to play together, but why waste energy judging each other if it's different?
Yeah.
So, okay. So we're here embracing that you're a horny little kitten that wants to get fucked. Are you the type of kitten that would like lick milk, or like only if it comes out of a tit, or like would it be in a bowl?
in my previous iteration of an OnlyFans model, I did like a really hot kitty set. So many good like ass shots of me like licking milk out of a little bowl.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay, since we're talking taboos, like I totally have like a licking peanut butter off genitals puppy fantasy as well.
You haven't done it yet?
No.
Shit, I want to do that.
I'm like, I don't even care which end of it I'm on.
I want peanut butter and almond butter, all the nut butter. Nut butter's off of nuts.
Yes. Actual nut butter.
Actual
Putting
nut,
the nut
literal
in the
nut butter.
But I have had a lot of really cute, like kind of wholesome experiences with like playing with people who are puppies, because especially in the Salt Lake City gay scene, there's so many sweet little puppy boys. So
Would you want to be any other kind of animal? For example, like a dragon or a unicorn or lion or I don't know, I'm just brainstorming animals. Or horse. Oh, you've been a pony. Is pony different from horsey for you? And is pony related to My Little Pony for you?
wow, okay, that's a lot of questions.
That is that's one of my best worst qualities.
Yes. No, I love costuming. Like I have like
Okay.
a total hard on for both cosplay, but also just like costuming and like fashion expression in a very creative, out of the box kind of way in general. So
Mm.
I've done like several unicorn costumes for Halloween and different parties and things like that. So I actually have done both unicorn and My Little Pony stuff, but it wasn't really in a sexual context. It was more in just like an expressive, creative costume context. But I would love to like dress up as a My Little Pony and have someone brush my hair. Like that would be so amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what horsey play is separate from pony play. Do you care to elaborate?
My brain might have made it up, but it just
Oh,
sounds like more grown up to me. I don't know. Like I'm imagining like a stallion. I don't know, or like a
ooh.
wild mare. I don't know. I think of ponies as sweeter, and I associate ponies with fair rides and like kind of the niceness. But I don't know if there's actually a difference. This is just my brain making it up. And I just said lion because you look like a lion to me, like a beautiful lioness. Like I could see
Oh,
you with. Although actually, now that I say that out loud, I imagined you with a mane. So I guess I imagined you as a man lion.
that's okay. That's how I pictured myself when you said that too. I
Oh,
was just
cool.
like,
Okay, we're on the same
yeah,
page.
yes,
What
yes.
about a dragon? I feel like you could be a dragon, but does it appeal to you? They're kind of scaly and hard.
I don't relate to that archetype. Like I've
Okay.
had really powerful partners that like a dragon was kind of like their icon. And then that really fun regular from my strip club. One time I like held him down and restrained him while he like dragoned out and like tried to bite me on all this stuff. So I
Ooh.
feel like maybe I'm more of like a dragon tamer than like
Okay.
a
Oh,
dragon
yes.
itself. Well, I guess I'm a dragon fucker too. Like this isn't necessarily like a like a deep sex story, but I did this journey with a tantra like collective, and part of the visualization when I like met this like I think it was like my inner masculine divine, but he was a dragon and he was like coiled around this like giant pile of coins and golden objects and stuff like that. It does make me realize that like I am a dragon tamer, but I'm also a dragon fucker because like our souls intertwined and like we became a sword, which is like a really powerful tantric visualization or like a tantric icon, I guess you could say. So I am the sword, but I'm not necessarily the dragon, but the dragon is like the yang to my yin or something like that, you know?
Cool. Okay, you had this wild time in your 20s and like now here you are. Like just give us a little bit of the like sexy stripper. What was that like? How did you get into courtesaning? Like tell us a little bit about the next milestones that feel relevant.
Sure. Oddly enough, I don't feel like I really had a lot of sexual evolution while I was a stripper. Like I was a stripper for 20 years. And so I squeezed all of the juice out of that was available to me for the most part.
I bet you're so good.
I'm good. I like one of my like it's not really a bucket list thing, but like it's something that I feel like is inevitable once my body's in the right shape to like record like a series where I teach stripper floor work because there are so many people who like teach stripper pole
Yeah.
dancing, but not like the floor work aspect. And honestly, I injured my shoulder a couple years ago, so I don't really do anything on the pole anymore besides like kind of like shake my butt and use it as like a prop, you know, like, oh, look at this phallic object. Hands are stroking, but I really did it to the fullest. And so even though I feel like I'm sexier than I've ever been in my whole life, the laws in Utah are very stifling with what you can and cannot do. And I felt like I wanted to help people in a way that I was not legally able to help them. And so I saw this need where people need like a sexual release, where they need to like have that skin to skin contact, that when your genitals are covered and there is no sexual contact, it makes people feel really deeply rejected. So having done both now, like, I do think that there is a deep healing within the safe container where you know for a fact that, like, no fluids are going to be exchanged unless you come in your pants, and you're not, like, actually cheating, depending on your definition within your relationship.
Yeah. Is this stripper wise or
Yeah,
courtesan wise?
stripper
Okay,
wise.
okay,
Yeah, stripper wise. So I think that there is, like, something very sacred in that safe container. But for me, like, I think that there was, like, a little bit of residual shame with that, where it was just like, well, I am willing to fuck for money. I am willing to go to those deep depths, and I am willing to hold, like, an even deeper container for people that want to be seen in that deeper vulnerability, where you're, like, literally letting someone into your body, or you're literally putting yourself into someone else's body. There's, like, a deeper level of vulnerability and trust. And I really do feel like I have the ability and the strength to hold that container in an informed way, in a consensual way, and in, like, a deeply service oriented way.
Yeah.
And I just felt the call. Like, I feel like I was trying to justify it through spirituality. Like, I was researching all these different programs. I don't know if the accounts have been destroyed. I don't know how trustworthy all these, like, channeled modern oracle accounts of what history was like. I got to a point where I'm like, I don't need permission from history. I don't need permission from religion or spirituality.
Yeah.
I can create the sacred prostitute archetype and container that I want to see in the world. And maybe I am the pioneer that has to create the way forward, and then I have to bring everyone else with me. But I couldn't find a mentor, and I couldn't find a teacher, and I couldn't find a program that was like, this is how you are a deeply spiritual, deeply grounded, trauma-informed prostitute. And I know that women are doing it. It's just that with the Fosta Sesta bullshit that's going on, it's, like, almost impossible to legally teach other women how to do this. And maybe that's why I couldn't find it, because it's hard for me to believe that it doesn't exist.
Relatable. I mean, even in just my work as a sex podcaster, I have been interviewing lawyers in the last week, and I have a grand vision of an art space that turns into a play space, and maybe we have trained performers and professionals who then can help get the party started. Well, apparently that part is illegal. You can have erotic performers, and there's so much red tape, and it's not even clear because the lawyers are like, well, it's about making yourself less of a target. I mean, even just trying to Google for business support for kink positive, neurodivergent, sex positive artists, I'm having a tough time finding the support I actually need. So I can only imagine, trying to find your people. Okay, so how did you find the place that you worked? Are you comfortable saying where it is? Like, what's it been like? And how has it affected your personal sex life? To whatever degree you feel comfy.
Yes. And I apologize if I cry, because it's, like, so beautiful and tender to me that, like, I found a safe legal outlet for this deep desire. So I work at Sherry's Ranch, which is a brothel in ProDomme, Nevada. It's about an hour outside of Las Vegas. And I've never been to any other brothels. Like, I'm this weirdo that, like, I choose what I'm doing and I just fucking go for it. Like, I never went to strip clubs before I became a stripper. I never went to brothels before I became a hooker.
How did you pick it?
Okay, so just a little bit of a rewind. Like, there's a sex worker who was an OnlyFans mentor of mine who came out as a courtesan. And I was just like, wow, this woman is, like, so herself. Like, she doesn't apologize for her age. She doesn't apologize for anything. And so I was so inspired that I was like, if this woman is so loudly and proudly herself and getting paid to fuck, I could do it. Like, I used to joke, and this is a little self-depreciating, but I'm like, oh, when I get too old to dance, then I'll just go be a hooker in Nevada. And so it was, like, kind of like one of those things in, like, my subconscious where I kind of pretended like it was a joke, but I always intended to do it. And so it kind of, like, moved up the timeline. Like, I don't feel like I was, like, necessarily 100% ready to go into full service, but there is, like, so much pressure in my current culture where, like, a lot of the girls that I knew were, like, offering full service in a way that didn't feel safe to me. And I was
Illegal?
like, really worried for them. Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah. And so, like, for me, I was just like, why would you fuck people in a scary, unsecure location for this tiny amount of money. And like, why aren't you on prep? And why don't you even know what prep is? And so, like, as I was like judging these girls, I was also creating this like fantasy checklist of like how it should be done and how it could be done safely and how it could be done legally. And so between the inspiration of like finding out that this woman that I already was like a fan of and like respected a lot was already doing it in a brothel, and just like seeing the way that I didn't want to do it and like feeling so much like concern for the safety of these people that I was trying not to care about because it felt like they were like undermining my environment. But like now that I have more clarity, I'm like, it's not a competition. There's enough money for everyone. There are enough clients for everyone. The people who want full service don't want the stripper service that I offered, which was like, these are the rules. This is the container. I will tell you no if you try to get outside of the container, and that makes you really safe. And I also kind of take that to the brothel where I'm just like, I'm not going to fuck you without a condom.
Yeah.
If it slips off, we're done.
Yeah.
So it's my responsibility, but it's also your responsibility because we both want to keep having fun, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like the people who want that container and they want that safety are going to come to Sherry's, and the people who want to like bear back their provider are going to go somewhere else. And so we have like clear agreements and we have clear expectations. And I try to go into as much of that as feels good without scaring off the people who are new to the industry and are already just like terrified to be there.
So it sounds like you stopped stripping and now you're at the brothel. And how has that transition been? Like, what's kind of like the favorite, nicest thing, or what do you notice that's different, or like what's standing out to Natasha Rose in this new era?
I don't know if it's my self-help journey, but I kind of crave constant evolution. And so I feel like things were so cut and dried, not only like with the club that I had worked at for so long and the expectations there, but there were kind of like financial limitations. Whereas at Sherry's, it's kind of like the sky's the limit. Like, of course, I try to be flexible with people's budgets, but there's no way that I'm going to like give the same services for the same prices that I would in the strip club, because this might not be well known, but the house takes half of what we make.
Oof.
And so, yeah. And then out of our half, we have to pay taxes, staff tips, licensing fees, travel fees, supplies, room and board, like any costume pieces and things like that, unless the client brings them for us. And so I need at least double the pricing that I would charge in the strip club. But since I didn't offer full services in the strip club, that's where it's scary and terrifying, but also really juicy, because sometimes it's like, yeah, I'm doing the same thing, but sometimes I'm like adding a zero at the end to the cost. And so without getting into specifics, like the parties where I've had the most connection with people, it tended to be the longer parties. So not only was it like higher value, but like the quality of attention that I was able to give and like the time that I was able to spend creating that connection were more in the luxury realm. And so I think it takes a lot of time to explore deeper fantasies. And then it also takes time for us to adjust to each other's frequency. So I like to offer like a full luxury experience where there's like the buildup with the foreplay. And sometimes if I'm in like a themed bungalow, there is a jetted jacuzzi tub. And so we can take a bubble bath and feed each other. And like all of that is included at a specific range. So from there and up, like you can order anything off of this like fancy menu. And then we also have like this specialty area, which is called Playland. You have to check it out on the website, but it's like some of the sexiest role play. Like I haven't gotten to play there yet, but I'm just like so excited. And some of the ladies that I work with have like these fantasies about having like threesomes or group parties. And like most of us have like sexy schoolgirl costumes and things like that, but they're also provided in that area. So I want to play in Playland.
So it really sounds like it's a lot like my experience as a photographer, where, just to make a connection here in the regular world, where like I definitely experienced the people who were spending money energetically, they showed up more for their sessions and they got more out of it. Whereas the people that were like, I need a budget headshot, they tended to be the ones that had the most issues, and they didn't bring good outfits and they were late, you know? I can imagine what it's like doing it with your body.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I definitely always have fun with budgets of all sizes. And I do think that it is about their commitment to themselves. So when someone has like a more luxurious budget, they allow the spaciousness that's able to be created within that specific container. Whereas if we're too rushed, or they only value the experience at like a specific level, then they're only able to create pleasure within their own body at that same level. And so I do think that it is reflective in that same way.
That makes sense. Do you feel comfy sharing with us like how working with people in this way has affected your own personal sexy feelings?
Again, it comes back to like projected shame. And so I think I assumed that my partners would have like more hesitation around dating a prostitute rather than dating a stripper.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's my self confidence or just that I have so much fun and that I get so much validation at the brothel that I take that into my real life as well. But the partners that I've had since I've been a full service sex worker have been really fucking cool about it. Like some of them get excited, some of them want to hear every detail, some of them don't want to know anything about it, but it's just like not an issue at all.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like it's almost like I've had higher quality lovers since I started doing full service.
Amazing. Okay, because I'm like here being like, I want to cross off my bucket list, and I know that not one person can do everything, and I don't know how I'll find a partner who's going to be comfy with me crossing off my bucket list and sharing it, and then are they going to want to reclaim me? But you give me hope. Do you just tell them right away? Are you like baller, like, hey, guess what?
It's kind of like in the sexual health checklist.
Okay.
Like I've gotten some flack from different therapists that I'm like trying to scare people off, but I'm just like, I don't want to emotionally bond with someone who doesn't want to meet the real me. Like they have to meet the real me as soon as I can trust that they can handle the information. I'm not really out in my community or to my family yet. And so usually I kind of preface it by like, how comfortable are you with keeping someone else's secret? Like, does that feel dirty and shameful to you? Or are you comfortable with like holding that information separate from the things that you share about other aspects of their life? And then if they respond in a way that feels supportive to me, then I tell them, like probably even before we have sex. And a lot of times even before we kiss. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah. And I'm very picky. Like I've been seeking for a more deep, meaningful, spiritual, and maybe even magical connection with someone. And so I haven't really found that partner yet since I've been looking. And I'm doing a lot of sex magic about it. And so, but I've been having like a lot of richness sexually in the meantime and just exploring people where they're at and exploring the connection that does exist without trying to force it to be something that it's not. And of course, I have like a deeper desire to have someone that is just as excited to explore Tantra as I am, or who might be as educated about Tantra or sex magic or magic in general as I am, which like I'm a total magic nerd, like outside of pretty culty or like secret society environments. Like I don't find a lot of people that have as much knowledge about magic or applying that through ritual as I do. And so it's hard to find someone who meets me on all of these different levels. But I do believe that since I exist, then that partner has to exist somewhere in the world, right? Totally. It's just like a matter of putting myself out there and being open to being vulnerable with somebody who is at that level as well.
I feel my own version of that. Okay. I know we've talked about a lot, but will you please tell us about foot worship?
Yes, that is one fetish that I actually got to explore at a professional level recently. Like I got a lot of it when I was stripping just because I feel like in that environment you have to get creative, but with the lack of force to be creative at Sherry's, there's a lot less of that and it's more like straightforward fucking. But I did have the sweetest guy. Like there was no hesitation. He was ready. Like almost as soon as I approached him, the negotiation was easy. He was so respectful and kind. And he was just so into it, which like gave me full permission to be so into it. And that's like one of my biggest turn-ons is like being penetrated or fucked like in my pussy while I'm having my feet sucked or licked and worshipped. And so he was turned on. I was turned on. We had so much fun together, and it was like a perfect match.
Simultaneous. Okay, it did not literally occur to me that it could be simultaneous. Okay, so literally, like getting fucked and your leg is like up, so you're flexible. Okay.
Yeah. Like when you have like your legs on someone's like shoulders.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Good point.
Yeah. And like your foot is like right there. Like it's so hard for me to not put my foot in someone's mouth during vanilla sex in that position. Like it's just like my knee-jerk reaction. Like I spend a lot of time just being like, well, my feet are so pretty. Of course they would want to suck on them, but like not actually doing it unless we've talked about it.
Your toesies aren't ticklish or anything?
in like a really delicious way. Like I'm
Okay.
not overly sensitive.
So you like feet in mouth, but like how else do we like worship? And do you like it even if you're not getting penetrated? Like is it a turn on tease for
Yes,
you?
yes. It's a totally erogenous zone for me. Like,
Wow.
especially the toes, but I've had people who kind of like deep throated my entire foot. I've had people who like suck on my feet and my toes and then like use the spit to like give me like a really deep foot massage. I love that.
Ooh,
Um,
ooh.
yeah, I had a like total foot enthusiast at my strip club who had a beard. And so he would like deep throat and suck on my toes. And then I would like use the spit as like a lubrication and I would just kind of like massage my foot through his beard. And it was just like this like soft, carpety experience, which was like kind of tickly and sensational on my feet, which was amazing.
Oh my gosh. I am so curious about feet people. Oh, I have a question. I interviewed someone who, like a year or two ago, and he said that when he's coming, if his partner pulls on his big toe, it's amazing for him. Have you ever tried this or had this
Huh.
happen?
No.
I want to try it. Okay.
I want to
Wow.
try it now too.
I also really have a fantasy about going on a date with someone who's really into feet and playing footsie with them under the table. Have you ever gotten to do that?
Ooh. I got like a really orgasmic foot massage under the table. Like I was wearing like really silky stockings, so it was like very luxurious.
Was there a tablecloth or was it like a bare table?
No, it was a tablecloth. I'm very discreet. Like the older I get, the more private I am. Like
Okay.
I used to be into public sex, but not so much anymore. Oh, okay. Can I tell you one more public sex
Please.
story?
Yes.
It was kind of like a double whammy because it was like an elaborate but like successful plan to seduce my favorite comic book artist of all time. We went to an orgy together and it was like a costume party. And so we were wearing like cute outfits. And I didn't end up fucking anybody besides him, but it
Uh-huh.
was so hot to just like have sex in a room full of hot people having sex and like hearing their noises and like it was like being in a porno. It was like the coolest thing. My biggest hesitation about public sex is the consent factor. So the fact that we
Yes.
were all adults, we all had some level of like screening done, and we were all consenting to be there in that environment made it really hot.
Yeah.
And so I would totally do that again. I'm a little bit uptight about like swinging and like watching my partner fuck somebody else. Like I haven't recently had the proper foundation built where that's something that turns me on personally. But I am really turned on by the both voyeuristic and exhibitionistic like aspects of orgies. And so I would definitely like fuck my partner at an orgy again in the future. So
Okay. Well, I'm doing my very best to create a really safe creation space where we can make those dreams come true. Because I hear that from a lot of people.
yay!
And like, I also just was talking to my friend who creates VR games, and I did not know that there was like a whole world of like avatars and like virtual sex parties that are happening like in VR. And now they're getting to the point where there's more feedback and then they go off and pair together. So I'm like, maybe that's a screening process. I don't know. Okay, wow. I could clearly talk to you and fantasize with you forever, but can you please tell us what are your sexual hopes for your future?
I do want to be tied up and be fucked with a fucking machine. I've never had access to that before, and so that's like a long standing bucket list item.
Yeah, I went to a party with my former dom. This was right before we broke up, but we were having a grumpy night, and I was weird, and his whole personality changed when we got to the sex party. And there was a Sibby in there, and we were upstairs, and no one was using it. I also didn't know how to use it, and he was weird. So I relate to that. Any other like specific fantasies, or and more broadly speaking, like just going forward?
I definitely also want to be in the middle of an Eiffel Tower. Like there's something so hot
Yes.
about like getting fucked onto someone else's cock.
Yes. Oh
Like
my
especially
god.
if I had like a deep connection with the person who was like penetrating me, there's just something so sexy about like the force of their thrusting like fucking me onto someone else and like them controlling like that at some level. It's really hot. So it's a little bit DS. And then also like I definitely want to explore more like energetic and spiritual
Yeah.
sex more deeply than I've had the opportunity to do so in like real life. Like I've done a lot of fantasy exploration during self pleasure, but like mostly tantra. But okay, this is I don't know why this is taboo. I feel like vulnerable about sharing this, but I fantasize a lot about like washing my beloved's feet with my hair
Ooh.
and
Ooh.
creating our own like peroskamos or like sacred union ritual. And
Okay.
so that's like something that's like very near and dear to my heart and that I feel like I just have to experience before this lifetime ends.
That almost makes me want to have hair again. Okay, so if you could go back in time and give younger you a piece of sex advice, knowing that obviously time happened perfectly and everything's perfect as is and you're perfect the way you are and everything. But in a hypothetical situation, what age or ages would you pick and what would you say?
Fortunately, I don't have a lot of regrets because my future mother-in-law told me to enjoy my body while I was young. And I still feel like I'm doing that. I'm still young enough to enjoy my body. So
Yeah,
I just took that and ran with it. And that inspired so much debauchery.
great.
But I do think that I would probably tell my 14-year-old self that if I didn't feel ready, it's okay to lose a boyfriend who puts pressure on me.
Natasha Rose, where can people find you on the internet?
I have the highest presence on Twitter, and I'm Natasha XOXO Rose on both Twitter and Instagram. I also have an OnlyFans where I combine my spicy model pictures with a little bit of intimacy and love coaching and tantra coaching in the future.
Beautiful.
So right now I'm kind of going through foundational stuff, and it's kind of like a self-guided go at your own pace kind of version, and it's just like a little sample over there as well. So my handle on OnlyFans is Pretty Blonde Natasha Rose, and it's blonde with an E.
Awesome. And we will link to those in the description below. Natasha Rose, thank you so much for being a guest on Sex Stories.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Do you have a sex question you want to ask me?
What's the best public party that you've ever attended, or is there one that you could recommend?
Lovers, that's our show. If you want to give your answer to any of the questions that you heard in this episode or share your thoughts, click the comment link in the description below. If you love sex stories, especially if you really look forward to listening to new episodes and are financially stable, please consider showing your appreciation by helping cover production costs. Visit creation.place/support for links to our sponsors, bonus content, and direct ways to support. Again, that's creation.place/support, and pick any or all of the options there to help me keep producing sex stories as a no-cost offering for everyone every week. Another excellent way to support sex stories is to help the pod grow. Share sex stories with a friend or 12, go post about it, and take 6 to 9 seconds to rate and review on Apple and Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. If you would like to apply to be a guest, fill out the application at www.creation.place/sexstories. The whole form is also on the contact page there. Creation Place is also where you can find the full list of sex stories questions that I offer to prep guests before our interview in case you want some inspiration when it comes to getting curious about yourself or a partner. Sex Stories is produced from start to finish by me and is edited by the fantastic Kimberly Loftus. Thank you for letting me into your ear. May your new year be happy. Definitely let me know if you have any sexy resolutions. And as always, remember to share sex stories.